You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and hitthatline.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
Welcome back to the HawgBeat Hour, episode 5 already. I'm your host, Mason Choate. We've got a lot going on at HawgBeat.com this week. It is A&M week. It is a big week. I mean, it's a big week. And Andrew Hutchinson is over there doing so much. I mean, Hutch, do you ever sleep? I feel like I've asked you this question before, but do you ever sleep?
I don't usually get a lot of sleep because whenever I'm not writing, I'm usually taking care of the 1-year-old, and let me tell you, they will take away your sleep. But hey, I'm coming off about 9 hours of sleep last night. I feel like a new man. I'm ready to go.
All right, well, tell everybody about the deal that we've got going on over at HawgBeat.com.
Yeah, for any college student out there, whether you're a student at the U of A, one of the other schools in Arkansas, or even somewhere out of state but still love the Hogs, hit us up. We've got a student discount for you. Send me an email at andrewhutchinson413@gmail.com from your EDU address. Again, whether that's uark.edu, whatever. Send me an email. Tell me you're a student and that you would like this deal, and we'll hook you up for your first year of HawgBeat for just $11.95. Usually a year-long subscription is about $100. So getting it for just under $12, that's one heck of a deal if I do say so myself. So shoot me an email, andrewhutchinson413@gmail.com, and I will get you hooked up with that deal.
Yeah, you don't want to miss out on that. A lot of content from the Arkansas Sports Writer of the Year, Andrew Hutchinson. A little bit from me, Mason Choate, and then some recruiting tidbits from Alex Trader as well. So go check it out. We got to talk about the Georgia Southern game. Not a whole lot to talk about. I mean, there's some big plays offensively for Arkansas, of course. Georgia Southern, Tomlin had that 76-yard run, a little busted play for the Hogs. But outside of that, not a whole lot to talk about. So let's just start with, Arkansas once again. They get it done on the ground, but we saw them dominate through the air as well. There were some throws that KJ Jefferson just missed, but I mean, the stats don't lie. I mean, 366 yards and 3 touchdowns. So Hutch, I mean, we know that the accuracy might be an issue, but does the accuracy matter if we're winning games?
I mean, I think it matters a little bit, but I mean, he is completing about 62% of his passes. So that's not terrible. I mean, it's below their goal of 65, but he does sometimes, as you said, miss a few throws that are there that you think like, oh my gosh, how could he miss that? He's a Division I quarterback. But again, Sam Pittman likes to say Dan Marino misses passes. Tom Brady misses passes. So I'm not really too terribly concerned. He did throw for 366 yards. That's somewhat misleading, I guess you could say, because 91 of that came on a touchdown to Treylon Burks. It was a screen pass where Treylon did all the work. But still, even without that pass, he had a career high passing in the game. He threw a nice deep ball to Warren Thompson for a 60-yard bomb, and he had I think another deep ball to Tyson Morris on the first play of the game. And they actually took some shots downfield. And I like to see that because I think that's one of KJ's strengths. And we haven't seen Treylon Burks actually catch a true deep ball yet, and I think that's going to be something that really helps them here once we enter SEC play.
Yeah, he had that 91-yarder, but it was basically just a wide receiver screen. I do want to talk about this ground game for Arkansas because so far we know that it's like the four-headed monster. And is it going to be able to maintain, especially against an opponent like A&M, who has a really stout defensive line? But I just want to ask you, Hutch, who has impressed you so far? I think I asked you this question last week, but is it still the same answer, or is there someone that you're looking at and you're like, that guy is the most impressive guy to me? Because from my perspective, I've asked people, and they say Dominique Johnson's the most impressive running back on that roster so far, outside of maybe Traylon Smith. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Traylon Smith. I think I've made that abundantly clear throughout the offseason and through these first couple of weeks of the season. He's the leading rusher right now. But he is a little bit banged up. He's been in a green jersey this week. He had to leave the game momentarily against Georgia Southern with some sort of injury, but he was able to return. But among that other group, I mean, it's hard to ignore what Dominique Johnson has done. I mean, he has been. I think he's been the surprise of the season so far, and I think even Sam Pittman has said that he has been a surprise player. He's averaging like 8 or 9 yards a carry, and that's a 235-pound back. He's not the guy I expected to be averaging that kind of yards per carry. I mean, I expected that out of an AJ Green or maybe even a Rocket Sanders, but for Dominic Johnson to be doing that has been really really impressive. And you got to give credit to AJ Green and Rocket Sanders too, because they're also running the ball really well. And KJ's running the ball really well. You got 5 guys all with 100 yards through 3 weeks. Arkansas is the only team in the country that could say that. That right there tells you how good and how kind of balanced it's been to this point of the season.
Now, we're going to move over to defense for a little bit because, I mean, Justin Tomlin, we did talk about, had that 71-yard run or 76-yard run, and there were a lot of busted coverages. There were some Georgia Southern wide receivers getting past the Arkansas secondary. So, Alex, I just want to ask you, like, what did you see there, and do you think that might be an issue moving forward that they're going to have to correct?
Yeah, you mentioned that long rush from Tomlin. Outside of that, it really felt like Arkansas was in control for the entire game on the defensive side of the ball. You never really had a drive. I think it was like 6 3-and-outs in the first 11 drives. It felt more dominant than that watching live. There was never really a question in this one about the Arkansas defense. I had my doubts coming in about the triple option and how they would defend that, but it was flawless on Barry Odom's part. Like I said, aside from that one run, there were receivers getting open, but you've had that in every game so far, and they've still been unable to capitalize on that. So, it's definitely something you want to shore up, but as of right now, it hasn't really burnt them too bad. I think the rushing attack is fantastic. I think most of the time, or the rushing defense is fantastic. I think most of the time the corners are playing pretty good football. It's just a matter of making sure you don't let those kind of busted coverages end up screwing you over in the long run.
So we did have a few injuries in that game, which is unfortunate, and some of them were on the offensive line, which is not what you want to see when you're going up against a team like Texas A&M this week. So we'll go ahead and hit some of those injuries here in this segment. Hutch, I mean, you're as close in on it as anybody. What do you know about what's going on? Who's possibly going to play? Who's possibly not going to play? Just tell us and give us a little update on that offensive line.
Yeah, so they lost right tackle Dalton Wagner and center Ricky Stromberg during that game. Wagner went down in the first half. I'm not really sure where the injury happened because I never saw him get hurt. I just happened to look down on the field and I saw Ty Clary in at right tackle. And I'm like, whoa, where the heck is Dalton Wagner? And sure enough, he was in the injury tent, and I watched him as he left the injury tent. He was walking very gingerly. He was not moving very fast. And then when he got to the bench, he sat down very slowly, kind of like you see like an old man sit down. So to me, it looked like it was like a back injury of some sort. He did not move from that bench, at least the rest of that half. I'm not sure what he did after halftime. But then Ricky Stromberg, he got rolled up on the second play of the second half. So it looked like a knee injury. I'm not sure how serious either one of these injuries are. However, I can tell you Sam Pittman does not sound optimistic that either one of them will be able to play. That's unfortunate. Ricky Stromberg was dominant in the first half, so much so that he was actually a co-offensive lineman of the week in the SEC, despite playing only one half of football. So, plus I think he's like the highest graded center in the SEC by Pro Football Focus. So those would be some pretty significant losses because Dalton Wagner's playing really well as well. So they did have to shuffle some guys around. We saw Ty Clary play 3 different positions on the offensive line, something we haven't seen in Arkansas. A lineman do that in the one game since 2014 when Frank Ragnow and Sebastian Tretola did it against UAB. So been a long time since we've seen a performance like that. We got to see a little bit of Luke Jones playing some left guard. We got to see Brady Latham move out to right tackle. Bo Limmer, He actually started the game at right guard and then continued to play right guard after Ty Clary got moved around. So they had to shuffle some guys around on that offensive line, and it sounds like they're going to have a new look offensive line this week against Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think that's something that's going to be interesting to watch. I'm working on a piece of like why Arkansas is going to win and why Texas A&M is going to win, and a lot of it is focused around the offensive line of Arkansas and the defensive line of Texas A&M for that reason. So we'll get more into that later on here in the HawgBeat Hour. But I want to ask you, Mr. Alex Trader, we've kind of seen Tyson Morris develop as the number 2 guy for KJ Jefferson in the wide receiver group. I personally was thinking and hoping it would be Davion Warren just based off of what we saw last year before he got hurt. But it's Tyson Morris, and he's been impressive so far. So do you think that's going to stick? And are there – I mean, we saw him throw the touchdown to Warren Thompson. Just what have you seen from the wide receiver group aside from Traylon Burks?
Yeah, I think the wide receivers have played pretty well. There was that one opening play that they ran where we talked about the deep shot. There was the opportunity there for that to be a touchdown. It was kind of angled weird when it was being caught, so it ended up not going all the way. But you saw some big plays, obviously, like you mentioned, Warren Thompson with that catch. I think Davion Warren's been, a sneaky part of this game, having him as kind of that third option right now, or maybe even fourth behind a guy like Warren Thompson, Keytron Jackson. You're able to kind of use his experience against other teams in that underrated role. I think with Morris right now, I think it probably will stick just because with KJ being a newer quarterback in this system, you're having to find a security blanket until you're able to kind of break out on your own. And being able to have Burks is a heck of a blanket, but also throwing in an experienced guy like Morris is going to help out.
All right, guys. Well, that's probably enough for Georgia Southern. Up next, we're going to talk about some news of the week. A little shaking up in the AP poll for Arkansas. They moved up a little bit. We already hit some injuries, but then we're going to talk about this 2020 schedule or 2022 schedule release, and then we'll talk A&M later on in the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com.
Back here on the HawgBeat Hour for segment 2 of this episode. Now, we hit the injuries in the last segment. We talked about the Stromberg and the Wagner injury, so we'll leave that one away. But let's talk about this ranking. Arkansas has moved up to number 16 in the AP poll. I don't think that I would have ever guessed before the season that going into week 4 against Texas A&M, Arkansas would be ranked number 16, Andrew.
I didn't think they were going to be ranked at all this year. I mean, if we're being quite honest, I mean, I predicted this team to go 6-6, but I had them going like 2-2 to start the year with losses to Texas and Texas A&M. Wouldn't have surprised me if they won either one of those games, and that might have been enough to get them in the polls. But to be ranked at this point, 13 games, I guess, into the Sam Pittman era is nothing short of remarkable, because I don't want people to forget just how bad Arkansas was during the 2 years of Chad Morris. I mean, they were historically, epically atrocious. And to be ranked already is just a testament to what Sam Pittman has done in just a very short amount of time.
Yeah, I thought it was possible to beat Texas going into the season, but I would never have guessed that Arkansas would be ranked going into this game. So you're right. It is truly remarkable, because you're talking 4 wins in 2 years. And then to go from that to winning 3 SEC games, and now you're 3-0 to start the season and have a legit shot at beating a top 10 team this week. So remarkable is probably the best word to describe it. But let's talk about this 2022 football schedule, because once again, it is the hardest schedule in the country. I saw it on Twitter this week. I think it was Tara Talmadge. She said defending national champions of the hardest schedule in the country, something like that. And it's true. I mean, your cupcakes are BYU, Cincinnati, and Liberty. Those are not cupcakes at all, Andrew.
No, and then you throw in the FCS game is against Missouri State, led by who? Bobby Petrino. And Missouri State has looked pretty good. I mean, they almost beat Oklahoma State, which is a top 25 FBS team in week 1. And then they go off and they beat UCA, which is a top 25 FCS team. So that's a good program. And Bobby Petrino in year 3, we know what he's done in year 3s before here in Arkansas. So I mean, you got to watch out for that game. Who knows if Hugh Freeze is still going to be at Liberty? Who knows if Luke Fickell's still going to be at Cincinnati? But it looks like those are all really, really good teams right now. BYU and Cincinnati are both ranked. Liberty is just outside of the top 25. So that's not an easy slate for Arkansas, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, those games could either be very difficult or, if Hugh Freeze and Luke Fickell leave, they could become a heck of a lot easier. Right now, Cincinnati really one game, and if they're able to beat Notre Dame, then they're probably, stuffing their nose right back into that college football playoff conversation. BYU just picked up a huge win over Arizona State. They're ranked, I believe it's one spot ahead of Arkansas right now, and Liberty's also receiving votes. So you're taking on one of the tougher non-conference schedules that doesn't have a Power 5 team in there that I can remember.
Yeah. Life does not get easier for Arkansas football, but the good thing is that, the culture has changed and they're not backing down. You guys kind of talked about before we started recording, just like the attitude of the players in the press conferences, and they're not talking about another team as if, we're a little worried because they're good. They're talking about them like, yeah, we can take care of these guys, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But the good thing for Arkansas is, and we wrote this down in our show outline, is that they took care of business against Georgia Southern. That was just a big thing to me, because how long has it been since you took care of business against a team that you were supposed to take care of business against, Hutch?
Yeah, I think you have to go all the way back to 2016. I think it was like 42-3 over Texas State or something like that. So they have not beaten a team like they beat Georgia Southern in a long, long time. It was their largest margin of victory over an FBS team, at least, since that game in 2016. They did beat, I think, Illinois or Eastern Illinois to start the Chad Morris era by a wide margin. But even that one wasn't super smooth. It wasn't total domination like what we saw right from the jump against Georgia Southern.
Yeah, so let's round this one out, because we kind of talked about the football news of the week that we really wanted to hit. Let's round this one out with some basketball talk, because there are 2 5-star recruits that might be coming to Arkansas. The first one that we know is going to commit on September 29th, I believe, is Nick Smith out of North Little Rock. This would be the highest rated basketball recruit in Arkansas history to step foot on campus, if I'm correct, I believe. So that would be just huge for Arkansas to get. And I think there's a lot of optimism that Nick Smith is going to come to Arkansas. Hutch, I know you've got some inside sources. I've heard a lot of people talking. What do you think about Nick Smith?
Yeah, I think it's trending really, really well for Arkansas right now. Obviously, from this recording till his commitment date, it's like 6 days or something like that. So a lot could change. But right now, as it stands, I feel really good about Arkansas's chances, and it would be a massive get. I think, Arkansas's highest rated player to ever sign during the Rivals era, at least, was Al Jefferson, who obviously went straight to the NBA, straight out of high school, never made it to campus. Nick Smith, I believe, is sitting at number 16. So that's right around where Bobby Portis and Olu Famutimi. That's a blast for the pass right there. I think they were ranked right around that area. But yeah, this would be a massive get. I think ESPN has them ranked in the top 10 or something like that. So this would be, if they could close the deal on Nick Smith, it would be a massive get for Eric Musselman and company.
If they add Nick Smith and then they go and add Jordan Walsh too, though, I mean, Final Four is like the expectation almost. If you don't make it to the national championship, then it's a disappointment, which is just crazy to think about. But the talent that would be on that basketball team, if you get both of those guys, is just unbelievable. So we'll be looking for that news coming up here. And you said 6 days. It feels a lot. Dang, September's gone by quick.
Yeah, next Wednesday.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's all the basketball talk we have. But that's some big news. So coming up next, Andrew Hutchinson is going to talk to Mark Passwaters from AggieYell.com. It's the rival site for Texas A&M. You know, if you want to know about this A&M offensive line, defensive line, a little bit about Zach Calzada, what he's going to bring to the table, you're going to want to check that out. And then in the last segment of the HawgBeat Hour, we're going to talk about A&M, give our score predictions and what we think is going to happen on the HawgBeat Hour.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Andrew Hutchinson, the managing editor of HawgBeat.com, the Arkansas site in the Rivals Network. The Hogs are 3-0 for the first time in 5 years. They're ranked number 16 in the AP poll, and they have a huge matchup looming with number 7 Texas A&M. With that, it's time to go behind enemy lines once again for an insider's perspective on the upcoming game. Mark Passwaters covers the Aggies for AggieYell.com, another one of our sister sites at Rivals. He was kind enough to join us from the airport today. He had a little vacation he went on to this past week. So, Mark, appreciate you taking the time. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Andrew. Just waiting to get home to Houston.
Well, let's jump right into it. What's kind of the excitement level among the Texas A&M fan base and that team right now for this top 25 showdown?
I would say anxiety is probably a better word than excitement. The Aggies figured the fan base figured coming into this season that this would be a game that, they'd pretty much dominate. You look at last year, there was a lot of concern about what Barry Odom could do and how Sam Pittman had really changed the mindset of the program. And then A&M came out and scored on 7 straight possessions, and that game was over by the middle of the third quarter. Obviously, beating Texas got people's attention. And the way A&M's offensive line is played, there's some concern here. People want to see the Aggies perform the way that they should, and they haven't as of yet.
I'm going to get into that offensive line here in just a second, but I know the first thing everyone wants to talk about is quarterback play. A&M got the bad news with Haynes King going down and going to miss several weeks. Arkansas will get Zach Calzada instead. How different is the offense with Calzada compared to King?
It's a little bit different because Calzada has the bigger arm of the two, but he's significantly less mobile. I mean, he can run. We saw that in the Colorado game. He made some big plays with his feet, but King is elite in terms of being able to run the football, especially a quarterback. So there have been some changes to the scheme. Calzada likes to stay more in the pocket. King likes to move around. The arm strength is the big thing in Calzada's favor. He can really push the ball down the field. Accuracy is hit or miss. So I think that if you look at it, regardless of who the starting quarterback's got to be, they've got to run the football. And that was their strength coming into the season, and that's what the strength has to be now.
And I was reading a stat, I think it's for Pro Football Focus or something, where Calzada's numbers are drastically different when he's pressured and when he's kept clean. So that kind of leads me into that offensive line talk. How would you assess that offensive line play through 3 games?
Not very good. I think what you have is 5 very talented individuals who have not become a unit. And that's been the big issue. You take a look at last year's group, which was one of the best, if not the best in all of college football. You had 5 guys that were very experienced. The only one who wasn't overly experienced was Kenny Green. He's an All-American. But Dan Moore, Jared Hocker, Ryan McCollum, Carson Green, all those guys had played 3 years or more, as a starter. And it paid off because they knew each other's moves in their sleep. And they went from a very average to subpar line in 2019 to one of the best in the country last year because of that match. Now you take a look at this year. Jameer Johnson from Tennessee is the left tackle, and he's been fine. He's a senior. Kenny Green, the All-American's at right tackle now, so it's a new position for him, at least in college. And then on the inside, you have Aki Ogunbaye, who is the best guard in the country in the 2020 class. Bryce Foster, a 5-star. and Layden Robinson, who was a 4-star 3 years ago, but is an absolute monster. So individually, this is a better group. As a unit, not so much, and that's proven to be the case so far. And I think that Jimbo has taken taken emphasis this week on, okay, you guys got to go out there, toughen up, figure out what you're doing with one another, because right now what you're doing ain't hacking it.
Yeah, I guess Layden Robinson has been a little bit banged up. I think they're expected to get him back. We were texting a little bit yesterday, and you were telling me a little bit of an injury update. Where does Texas A&M stand in terms of injuries right now?
Well, it's a good question. Obviously, King is out. He broke his leg against Colorado. Hopefully, he'll be back in a couple of weeks. I think that it's more likely he's back from Missouri, which is in 3 weeks, than Alabama in 2, even though that would be very nice. And the big question for this weekend, I think, if you're a Hog fan, is what's going on with Agent Zero, Anais Smith. That guy is a jack of all trades. He's one of the most exciting players in college football. He had a concussion last week and missed the second half. Jimbo seems to think he's okay, but concussions are tricky things. So, they haven't really given a diagnosis on him. So he's basically the proverbial game time decision. Outside of that, I think Robinson will be back. That means they'll get their original 5 in there after Blake Traynor played last weekend. Was not good. Devon A-Chain got hurt late in the game against New Mexico. He's going to be able to go. So really the only question is what's up with Smith.
And now flipping things over to the other side of the ball, it seems like Texas A&M always has a really talented defensive line with a bunch of dudes. What's that unit looking like so far this year?
They are dogs. They are really good. This is the best defensive front I think they've had probably in 20 years. It starts with DeMarvin Leal, the All-American, who has played both defensive tackle and defensive end this year. It's strange because the last couple of weeks against Colorado and New Mexico, it seemed like he came out a little bit lackadaisical. Then somebody ran a play at him, had a little bit of success. Then he got really mad and just absolutely dominated from there on out. So he's the starter at one end. Michael Clemens, who I think has been there since the Reagan administration, is on the other side. He had a great game against New Mexico. And then in the middle, you have Jaden Peavy, a fifth-year senior, and McKinley Jackson, who I think Hog fans will remember from the recruiting sagas of 2 years ago. So those guys are in the middle, but they've got a lot of depth. They can bring guys in waves, and this is something they haven't been able to do in a long time. I think that, honestly, it's probably the best defensive front in the SEC and maybe the country.
So that kind of leads me to my next question. Putting the headset on, if you're an offensive coordinator, how would you scheme up to try to beat this Aggies defense? And who are the other guys maybe outside of that front group that you have to account for?
There's a lot of motion and misdirection, honestly, because that seems to have been what has helped opponents so far. Really, it hadn't been necessarily misdirection, but running for your life. Kent State's quarterback had some pretty good yards rushing on the ground, but it was because he had been flushed and had to move. Brendan Lewis for Colorado had a couple of really nice quarterback runs. I think that leads well towards what KJ Jefferson wants to do. But, of course, last week, Terry Wilson, the former Kentucky quarterback, played against A&M. Kind of a similar guy, not nearly as big, but, similar traits in terms of trying to run the ball, and got nowhere. So maybe they're getting a little smarter with it. But the linebackers are a big question, not because of their talent, but because of maybe being overly aggressive. Aaron Hansford, Andre White, Edrin Cooper are the big three there. And they have had trouble. How do I put this? Basically running themselves out of place. They got a little too aggressive and, left their gap assignments, and it's caused problems for them. I say it caused problems. The biggest play they gave up last week was 16 yards. They haven't given up anything over, I think, 19 in 7 quarters. So they've kind of clamped down. But that's the big thing is they've got to stay home. They have to play assignment football. They run themselves out of position. Then the Hogs have the ability to run the ball, up the middle.
And we'll wrap things up with this. You don't have to give a score prediction necessarily, but how do you see this weekend's game playing out? And what would you maybe say is the biggest key for this game?
I think it all hinges on A&M's offensive line. If they play better, then A&M has the talent advantage, and they should win the ball game. But if they don't improve, and Barry Odom schemes the way he schemes, then it becomes a very interesting ball game. A&M wants to go out there, run the ball with Isaiah Spiller, run the ball with Devon Achane, make things easier on Calzada. But if the game is put on Calzada's shoulders because they can't run because that line isn't effective, then all of a sudden you're in trouble.
Well, I think that's it for me, and I appreciate the insight, Mark. I'm really looking forward to what should be a really good game. And as a reminder to everyone, kickoff is scheduled for 2:30 Central, and it'll be televised on CBS. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you can see all of these Know the Foe segments, as well as press conferences, practice clips, recruit highlights, things like that. And as always, head over to HawgBeat.com for your one-stop shop for all things Hogs.
You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com.
All right, back here on the HawgBeat Hour, I'm your host, Mason Choate, along with Andrew Hutchinson and Alex Trader from HawgBeat.com. Now, before we get started talking Texas A&M, I do want to give Andrew another opportunity to tell the listeners about this deal we got going on over at HawgBeat.com.
Yeah, college students, if you're listening, if you like what you're hearing now and want to get all sorts of great Arkansas content at HawgBeat.com, we've got a deal for you. We will give you your first year of HawgBeat subscription for just $11.95. That's usually about $100. All you have to do is send me an email at andrewhutchinson413@gmail.com, and I will hook you up with that deal. You get incredible coverage. We've got Alex covering recruiting, Mason helping me out with the football season, and of course, all of the content that I bring every week. It's a heck of a deal. Alex, he's crushed numbers. It's 31 cents a day. So I think y'all can afford that. Even broke college kids can afford that.
Hold on. That math doesn't work, because if it's $11.95 for an entire year, 31 cents a day, that doesn't add up. That must be for a week or maybe a month.
I don't know.
Either way, that's a lot. That's a big deal. Hold on, Alex, you got the numbers now?
It's 33. So I had 11.25, I think, the first time, but it's very, very cheap for some very good coverage from the three of us, as well as we have great basketball stuff over at HawgBeat too. Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, save that money that you're going to go spend at Cane's or Whataburger and get yourself a HawgBeat.com subscription. You will definitely enjoy it more than what's the 4-count meal at Cane's called? The box combo.
Box combo.
Yeah.
Used to work there.
Yeah, we're giving out free ads now. Okay, let's talk about Texas A&M, guys. Biggest game since when? I mean, we kind of talked about it before we started recording, but Hutch, I mean, you said biggest game since the Bobby Petrino era. What game in the Bobby Petrino era do you think that was the biggest game since then?
I mean, I think you could really start with the last game Bobby Petrino coached. That Cotton Bowl to cap the 2011 season was pretty big. I think it was a top 10 showdown with a really good Kansas State team. So I think it's the biggest game since then. They have had some top 25 games since then. In 2016 season, there were a few, I think in 2015 as well. But this one it feels more significant just because it is early in the season. You're trying to start 1-0 at SEC play. You could really assert yourself as a true, I don't know if I would say contender in the SEC West, as long as Alabama is playing football. But you could be a contender for maybe, if you win this game, you at least position yourself to where you could be in one of those maybe New Year's Six bowls or, another high profile bowl game that you really haven't been in conversation for since that Bobby Petrino era.
I'm curious, and I know we're going to get into talking about A&M and do a little deep dive, but I'm curious, Hutch, if Arkansas wins this game, where do they come out in the AP poll next week? Are we looking at a top 10 team?
I think so. I really do. I mean, it probably also depends on what other teams do ahead of them. I'm not sure what all is ahead of it, but I mean, I think Notre Dame plays Wisconsin. That's a game Notre Dame could easily lose. Wisconsin already has a loss, so I don't think Wisconsin would jump you. And Florida's already lost. They kind of held pat, after losing to Alabama really tight. Perhaps you could jump them. You jump Texas A&M as well. So I think they would find themselves, in my opinion, they would be a top 10 team headed down to Athens, and that would just be a massive, massive game for Arkansas. It's been a long time since I believe that Cotton Bowl to end the 2011 season that they've played a top 25 matchup or a top 10 matchup.
Yeah, massive game at 11 a.m. That's awesome. So
hey, gotta compete with that big dude.
That's true. Alex, I want to ask you this question because I know you have strong opinions about it. Arkansas and A&M neutral site game in Cowboy Stadium, Wisconsin Notre Dame neutral site game at Soldier Field. I mean, if this Arkansas game is in Fayetteville, it's probably an atmosphere just like Texas, probably bigger. What I know you don't like these neutral site games. Tell us your feelings about it, Alex.
Yeah, and I don't hate the concept of a neutral site game. I think, what Alabama and Miami did at the start of the year, despite that being a not a great product on the field, I think those type of games are interesting, and it also gives the players kind of a reward system for being in those top level programs. What I do have a problem with is this is supposed to be a every year neutral site game. Last year it was played at Kyle Field. It was played in College Station. There should be a pause in that contract to give Arkansas one home game just to even it out. The same thing happened with Army and Navy last year. I just think that's kind of not fair. And you're seeing it even with home conference games. I mean, Ohio State has to travel back to Ann Arbor this year, even though last year they didn't get their matchup. So I think there should be kind of that, if you're doing a neutral site and then it switches to a home game, whatever the circumstance, you should get that home and home aspect of it to help both teams' fan bases be able to get involved.
All right, time to actually dive into this A&M team. Hutch, you started it this way with Mark Passwaters, and we're going to start it this way here. The quarterback position for A&M. Haynes King, the injury against Colorado, he goes down, broken leg. So then Zach Calzada comes in, actually leads them down on the game-winning drive, throws the game or go-ahead touchdown. He looked okay against New Mexico. I mean, it was New Mexico. But this, and I heard you say this on the radio yesterday, and I thought it was really interesting. Arkansas has the better quarterback in this matchup. And that's so weird to think about. KJ Jefferson, a 4-star, and then Zach Calzada, a 3-star when you're playing Texas A&M. I don't know. That's just weird to me. Hutch, what do you think about Calzada so far? You've mentioned some of his stats here and there, but what do you think?
I feel a lot better facing Zach Calzada than I do a Haynes King. I mean, because Haynes King brings that athleticism, and he can run on you. We heard Mark Passwaters talking about that, and Calzada does have an arm. He does have a cannon, but he's kind of more one-dimensional. And plus, you put him behind that offensive line that's kind of struggled a little bit. Maybe Arkansas could get to him, especially with this big his second career start at A&M. So it's going to be an interesting matchup for Arkansas, and I think it favors the Hogs. Of course, that old Arkansas thing, kind of like, oh man, we've seen this before, backup quarterback looking like a Heisman contender, especially in this series. So I don't think that'll happen. This is a new coaching staff. I don't think Mariota will allow that to happen. But you do kind of have that little voice in the back of your head that goes, well, it is Arkansas. This happens. So I'm anxious to see how it plays out.
I can definitely relate to that feeling, and I felt that feeling going into the Texas game when Hudson Card was coming to town. I felt like, Hudson Card is going to have the game of his life. He's going to, just completely dominate Arkansas. But you're right. Barry Odom has done what he's supposed to do. He did what he was supposed to do against Hudson Card, and that puts a little bit of confidence inside of me that I don't know if I want that confidence inside of me, because I'm just ready to be hurt again, like always. And so I think you're right, though. I think Arkansas has the edge in this matchup. Now, the really interesting thing is, and you've mentioned this stat a lot this week, is that Calzada under pressure is not a very good quarterback. when he has a clean pocket, he is. Do you think Arkansas will be able to generate enough pressure to just keep him uncomfortable the entire game?
I think so. I mean, through 3 weeks, I feel like maybe the strength of Arkansas's defense, as crazy as this sounds, is that front. I mean, I want to say front seven, but it's more like a front four plus two linebackers, so front six or even a front five if they go with a three-man front with the two linebackers. Um, they have done a good job of getting after the quarterback. Yeah, Trey Williams probably needs to kind of reel things in a little bit with three late hit personal fouls in the last two games. But I think that they could get after the quarterback this year. That's even you know against a struggling offensive line. That should make it even more profound this week. So I think they're going to really pressure him. I think they're going to make him uncomfortable. And as you said, Pro Football Focus, that the differential between when he's got a clean pocket versus when he's pressured, it's dramatic. I mean, most quarterbacks are going to struggle whenever they're pressured compared to whenever they're kept clean, but not as dramatic of a difference as what we've seen so far with Calzada.
This A&M defense is a defense that they're the number one scoring defense in the country. Now they haven't played like amazing offenses. They've only allowed 2 touchdowns on the year. They haven't allowed a touchdown in 7 quarters of play. I'm just curious, like, what do you think about this defense? Because they haven't played that great of competition. Now, Arkansas hasn't either, outside of a Texas team that, the jury's still out on Texas. We don't know if they're actually going to be, a top 25 team. But is this A&M defense that good? Because we know they have talent, or is it just the fact that they haven't played amazing teams yet?
It's hard to say. I mean, Kent State and New Mexico are nothing to really get excited about. Just like, as you said, Rice and Georgia Southern aren't exactly, you know, powerhouses. So I think they're really good. I mean, they always have a really good defensive line. I mean, we've seen some really good players come through there, and it sounds based on what Mark Passwaters said in my interview that he thinks it's as good and as deep as a defensive line as they've had in 20 years. And so that's kind of a scary thought. And Sam Pittman, he was telling the media the other day that not only they could stop the run, but they could also get after the passer. Sometimes you don't see a defensive line that could do both of those things, and they do both of them well. So I think it's a really good defense. I'm anxious to see what they are, behind that defensive line. It looks like they've got some really good players in the back end, at safety and things like that. But that defensive line, that DeMarvin Leal, however you say his name, that guy is a beast, and you're going to have to definitely account for him because that guy can really get after you.
Now, I'm going to switch back over to the offense here. I want to talk about the A&M running backs because they're really freaking good. Isaiah Spiller is a really good running back. I know he uses the same offseason trainer as Traylon Smith does. So that's a little interesting thing, fun fact. And then I heard Passwaters say Devon A-Chain. Is that how you pronounce it?
I would trust him. That's for sure. I have no idea, honestly.
Okay, that's how he said it. So Spiller and A-Chain are the running backs there, and they're both really good. But it's interesting, Arkansas is bringing 4 running backs who are really good. So, Alex, I just want to ask you about these running backs from A&M. We know Spiller is really good. A-Chain's a really good pass catcher, and then he's also really quick. There was a subscriber on HawgBeat that actually said he was like a state champion in the 4x100, I think. So what do you think about those A&M running backs, Alex?
Yeah, it's a great duo. Both guys are able to come in out of the backfield and give you another option in the passing game. But as well as that, Isaiah Spiller's coming out and averaging 6.3 yards per carry so far this year. He's going to be able to go out there and make a bunch of plays. Granted, Kent State, I think they have a pretty good offense with Dustin Crum, but the defense is not something you're going to be looking at as a staple win. And then same with New Mexico, except their offense really isn't that great. I think the Colorado game is probably the best indicator that you're going to be able to have about what these guys can do. And in that game, they scored 10 points. And it came off of a late Zach Calzada scramble into the end zone. So I think they could get it going. I would, if I'm Barry Odom, I say, hey, run that Texas game plan back. You've got a similar situation at quarterback where there was a quarterback battle leading up into the season. You don't really know which guy was going to start. Something happened. And we saw both guys play in that Texas game. We won't be seeing that here, but you've got that newer guy in the situation. As the running backs go, Spiller is widely considered a top 5, top 10 back in the country. Bijan Robinson is arguably better than Spiller, and they were able to keep him completely in check. He was a non-factor in that Texas game. I think, with the pressure that they brought, they were able to get to Hudson Card and cause him issues, not only in the pocket, but he wasn't able to get out and use his speed to his advantage. I think, like we mentioned, Haynes King, a better runner than Zach Calzada. If you're able to keep him in check and continue to bring pressure, I think it's going to make the running game have to carry the load. And with how Arkansas has been playing, I don't know that they're going to be able to do that with Spiller and a chain.
Yeah, Spiller last season against Arkansas, I want to say it was 3.8 or 3.9 yards per carry. So the Arkansas defense did a decent job of containing him. He only had 82 yards, but he had a score as well. So it'll be interesting to see if they can, contain him even more, or just, at least not let the running backs just dominate you. But I want to talk about the pass catchers. I'm going to ask Hutch about this. Jalen Weidermeyer. I think that's how you pronounce it. Is it Weidermeyer or Weidermeyer?
I think Weidermeyer. That's how I say it, at least.
We write the name. We don't pronounce it. So Weidermeyer. And then we know Weidermeyer is going to play. We know he's a great tight end. Sam Pittman talked about him, how they're going to focus in on him because he dominated Arkansas last year. And then Aina Smith. I think that's how you pronounce that one. I mean, people talk about this dude like he's one of the best athletes in the entire country. He may or may not play. You have to think if that guy is anywhere close to possibly being able to play, Jimbo Fisher has to play him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because he does have a concussion, I guess. He suffered that during the game last week. So it'll only be a week removed from that. I don't know how severe of a concussion it is or anything like that, but I'm always a little bit hesitant when it comes to concussions because you're talking about the brain. So I don't know if he'll be ready or not, but that would be a massive blow because he's their top receiver and very, very good. But as you mentioned, they've got Jalen Weidermeyer. He is a really good tight end. I remember last year being thoroughly impressed by what he did. So you're going to have to figure out a way to slow him down. And if they don't have Ainias Smith and if you can slow down Jalen Weidermeyer, I'm not sure what else they could do. For Zach Calzada, you have to really, really rely on that run game like we were talking about.
And speaking of that run game, let's just go ahead and talk about that offensive line. Mark Passwaters talked about it quite a bit with you, Hutch. So what did you learn about the A&M offensive line from him? And, you mentioned earlier that you think Arkansas can generate pressure against them. But in the run game, how do you think the Hogs will fare against this offensive line that hasn't been super impressive this season?
Yeah, I mean, I thought a really telling moment this week came on Tuesday after practice. We were talking to a few of the players on Zoom, and a reporter asked Torian Carter, one of Arkansas's defensive tackles, like, "Hey, what are your impressions of the Texas A&M offensive line? Based on what you've seen in film." And Torian he smiled and kind of laughed, and he's like, "Oh man, I almost said something." And it almost sounded like he was getting ready to say like, "Oh yeah, these guys aren't very good," or, give them some bulletin board material, or maybe reveal the game plan or something like that. It was kind of like, okay, they're feeling confident in what they could do. So I really think they're going to really exploit that offensive line. I mean, I'm really impressed with Kenyon Green, the right tackle for Texas A&M. He was an All-American last year as a sophomore, I believe. So he's obviously really, really good. And I think these other players are really good pieces, as Mark Passwaters was saying, but they aren't really playing well as a unit right now. And I think Arkansas, with this being just the fourth week of the season, can still exploit that and use that to their advantage.
Now let's switch over to defense and round it out with the A&M secondary. they got a guy at safety, Leon O'Neal Jr. I wrote about him in my Players to Watch article. He's kind of their version of Jalen Catalon in the backfield there. He does a really, really good job of surveying the field. He's their highest graded defensive player according to Pro Football Focus. But aside from O'Neal, Hutch, have you learned anything else about the A&M secondary? Do you think that this Arkansas receiver group and KJ Jefferson are going to be able to, expose them a little bit?
Yeah, I mean they've got some really good pieces. I mean, Damani Richardson's another safety that's back there that's had success, and their nickel, whose name escapes me at the moment, has graded out well this year. So they have some pieces. Now, can they stop Treylon Burks? I'm not 100% sure. Part of me thinks this might be the Treylon Burks coming out show. I think that the 91-yard touchdown may have been just kind of what he needed to get back into a groove. And it could be a really big game for him. That's kind of what I'm personally expecting.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up about just how we think it's going to go. I think there's a lot of Arkansas fans that are optimistic, but also we talked about it, getting your hopes up. I don't know if you want to get your hopes up or not. So, Alex, we'll start with you. Just what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I wavered on the Texas game. I came into the season thinking it wasn't winnable. Ended up changing my mind, changing it back, and then eventually going back with the Hogs for that one. This is actually a game where I came into the season and I marked it off as okay, this is a loss for sure. Things have changed. Arkansas's looked a lot better. A&M's looked a lot worse. I've seen the spread anywhere from, 5.5 to I just saw 4.5 over on the Barstool Sportsbook. It looks like the trend is going towards Arkansas, and I think Arkansas is going to win this game. And I think they do it pretty convincingly. I have them 27-16. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but I do think that Arkansas will be able to kind of keep it close and then eventually run away with just how dominant that rushing attack has been.
I'm going to give mine because I feel like I've gone last in every episode. So I'm going to give mine and let Mr. Hutchinson go last. So I think I agree with you, Alex. Entering this week alone, I thought that Arkansas was going to lose this game. The more I've looked at A&M, the more I've listened to the A&M people talk and say that they're not confident. I think Arkansas is going to win this one. I have them winning 31-20. So kind of like what you have, or Alex, something around that area. And I think Arkansas will win convincingly. I think that they are the better team in this matchup. So, Andrew Hutchinson, round it off for us.
Yeah, it kind of scares me because I'm feeling kind of like y'all. I don't know how I feel about that, but I think Arkansas can run away with this game. Well, I say run away. I think they're going to win it, not handedly, but I think they win by multiple scores. I'm kind of leaning towards 24-10. I think the defense is really going to get after that Texas A&M offense. I think Calzada is going to struggle, and I think Arkansas is going to do just enough to contain that run game, and they're going to do just enough to find ways to score. Maybe we see a defensive score this game by Arkansas. Maybe. I'm kind of thinking that. But I think Arkansas wins this game by 2 touchdowns. That scares the heck out of me that I'm saying that, but maybe that's a little bit overconfidence. But I think the streak ends this year.
Hey, I mentioned it earlier. I'm ready to be hurt. I think we're all ready to be hurt, guys. And all the fans out there listening, I think you're ready to be hurt too. But let's just hope that we don't get hurt this weekend. So that's all the time we got for you today on the HawgBeat Hour. We appreciate you listening. Don't forget to go check out all the content at HawgBeat.com. And if you're a student, sign up for that deal. You will not be disappointed. Thank you for listening to the HawgBeat Hour.